My whole life, I thought that Greek mythology was, well, a myth, but apparently it's not. I just stumbled across this video that's called Ancient Greek Myths That Turned Out to Be True. For those maybe unaware, Greek mythology is like Cyclopes, giant krakens, ancient gods. And apparently some of it's true. I'm calling baloney, but let's check it out.
The Minotaur and the Labyrinth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, cut me a piece of cheese right. Those are not real. Minotaurs are not real.
The monster with the body of a man and the head of a bull, locked away inside a giant maze on the island of Crete, was one of the most famous myths in history for centuries, until archaeologists actually started digging on Crete in the early 1900s. What they found stunned everyone. Underneath the ground, they uncovered the ruins of a massive palace, and it was pretty weird. It had over 1,000 rooms, twisting hallways, and staircases that led nowhere. In other words, it looked almost exactly like a labyrinth. That alone would be crazy enough, but it gets stranger.
Okay, all right. He's cooking a little bit, I'll admit. But I'll also say that, like, no one cares about the labyrinth being true. It's just a maze. Bro, we got mazes. I got a hay bale maze down the street. I don't care about a labyrinth. I care about the freaking giant bull that walks on 2 legs, that wields a giant war axe.
Inside the palace, archaeologists found wall paintings showing young men and women leaping over the horns of a charging bull, a dangerous sport that seems to have actually been practiced by real people at the time. This lines up with the old story, where Athens had to send 14 young people to Crete every few years as a sacrifice to the Minotaur. Historians now believe this myth may actually reflect real practices, such as forced tribute or ritual games involving bulls. The Golden...
Okay, to be clear though, the Minotaur, like, wasn't actually real. It was just a bull, right? Like, there's no proof that the Minotaur actually existed. That would be absurd, but I guess a half-true tale. Anyway, a lot of these myths, I think I'm gonna know because I read the Percy Jackson series. Shout out Percy Jackson. That's like my favorite book series ever. Is it only one of 2 book series that I've ever read? Yes, but it's my favorite of the 2 that I read, so there's that. Anyway, next up, the Golden Fleece. This is like a sheep that has a golden fleece, and I'm pretty sure Zeus loved that thing. I know that Cyclopses do.
In the Greek myth of the Golden Fleece, a hero named Jason sails across dangerous seas searching for a ram's fleece, except this fleece isn't ordinary wool, but solid, glowing gold, so valuable that kingdoms would go to war over it. Of course, most people assumed it was just a myth. After all, rams can't grow gold. But when historians looked closer at where this myth was set, a region near the Black Sea, which is now part of modern Georgia, they found something that changed the whole picture. In that exact area, mountain rivers flow down from high-altitude regions that contain natural gold deposits.
No
For
way.
thousands of years, and in some remote villages even recently, local people used a very peculiar technique to collect this gold. They would take sheepskins, fleece still attached, and lay them down inside the river. That way, tiny flakes and grains of gold, washed down from the mountains, would get trapped in the wool's texture. After some time, they would pull it out, dry it under the sun, and shake or comb out the trapped gold. Now, imagine being a traveler passing through the region and just seeing sheepskin covered in gold. You'd likely think that the wool itself had turned to gold. This is likely how the story spread and turned into the famous Greek myth.
That's crazy. It's cool to, like, hear how these myths became myths. You know, because I guess none of these are going to be, like, exactly true to the T, but they all are stories for a specific reason. And it's cool to find out, like, how they became the story that they are. That's probably how a lot of, like, stuff in the Bible is. Like, a lot of people take what is said in the Bible, not literally, but, like, kind of figuratively. I think that these are kind of the same thing. Next, we have the Oracle of Delphi. Delphi?
Back in the days, people from all over the world would travel to one of the most mysterious parts of ancient Greece, a temple built into the side of a mountain where the Oracle of Delphi resided. This priestess would sit inside a small chamber deep in the temple, and according to old writings, she would breathe in some kind of vapor or gas rising from a crack in the ground. After breathing it in, she would fall into a trance and tell prophecies. For a long time, historians thought this was just a myth, but then, starting in the late 1990s, a team of geologists and archaeologists decided to actually study the ground beneath the temple roof.
What is going on down there? What is going on under that little crack? Is someone farting? They got someone farting down there? But they got someone spilling some stank juice down there. Now, there's probably like some sort of sulfuric acid or whatever that just like gives off fumes that make you hallucinate and whatever. That's what I'm assuming this is.
What they found changed everything. The temple was built directly over a crack in the Earth's crust where 2 huge blocks of rock meet. These cracks can release gases like ethylene from the rock below, which in small doses is known to cause lightheadedness, trance-like states, and even a floating dreamy feeling. Water samples taken from a nearby spring connected to the temple also showed some traces of these gases in really small amounts. Be it from ethylene or hypoxia, the priestess may not have been faking a connection to the gods. She might have genuinely been affected by those vapors.
Yeah, that's insane. Like these stories, they remind me of, oh gosh, I don't know, the stories of the Bible. I'm not too familiar, but like there's one where there's like the burning bush, right? That's a thing. I forget who saw it or who like, or what it did. But I remember something in the Bible that's like, there's a giant like beam of fire. And I'm starting to feel like it probably like might have been real, but maybe not to that extent. Or like something happened where it looked like that, but maybe wasn't that. Or like Moses parting the sea, for example. I wonder like if part of that story is true, but it's not as simple as him going, huzzah, huzzah. You know what I'm saying? And hearing these stories makes me feel like that's probably the case. Next up, we have Atlantis. Okay. This is like the underwater city.
Atlantis and the Minoan eruption. Atlantis was one of the most famous lost places in history, a powerful and rich island civilization that supposedly sank into the ocean in a single day, according to Plato. For centuries, people searched oceans and coastlines trying to find proof of it, without much luck. Thus, many just assumed Plato made the whole thing up as a moral lesson. But then archaeologists and geologists started paying closer attention to something that actually happened long before Plato ever wrote his story: an enormous volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, now known as Santorini. This was one of the most powerful volcanic explosions in human history, so massive that it blew apart a huge portion of the island, causing the center to collapse into the sea and leaving behind a giant crater now filled with water. At the time, this island was home to a thriving and advanced society called the Minoans, known for detailed art, multi-story buildings, and organized trade across the Mediterranean. Many historians now believe Plato may have heard old stories about this real eruption and reshaped them into the tale of Atlantis.
That is not what I thought it was going to say. I swear like some scientists or explorers or whoever they're, you know, whatever their title is, have found like ancient remains in the ocean, like kind of recently. I thought that's what he was going to say, but that's not really what he said. Next, we have Troy and Troy's War. If you haven't seen The Odyssey, I recommend seeing The Odyssey. It's a good movie, but The Odyssey takes place right after the Trojan Horse, which is Troy's War. But I wonder how they could possibly know like how real or detailed the war is or was.
For a long time, the Trojan War was treated as one of the greatest stories ever told, but still just a story. For centuries, many historians assumed Troy itself never even existed, believing it was a made-up setting. However, in the 1870s, an amateur archaeologist and a diplomat became convinced Troy was real, based on clues hidden inside the old poems describing its location. They began digging in northwestern Turkey, and what they found stunned the world. Beneath the ground were the remains of an actual ancient city, with thick defensive walls and clear signs of destruction by fire, all matching descriptions from the old stories closely enough that most historians now agree it was Troy. Even more interesting, archaeologists discovered that this city wasn't destroyed just once. Because people kept rebuilding on the same spot for thousands of years, the ruins actually show multiple cities stacked on top of each other. And one particular layer, believed to date to around the time the war was said to happen, shows serious battle damage, collapsed walls, and signs consistent with a violent siege.
It's pretty crazy that, like, let's just say humans get wiped off the earth today. In like 500 years, maybe 1,000 years, almost everything that we know, everything that we built, everything that we did will be gone. Mother Nature will take over all of it, to the point where, let's just say, like, aliens came to visit Earth. They probably wouldn't even know that humans ever existed. We would just be gone. And this is kind of proof. I mean, Troy, I'm assuming, was a big city. I mean, there's a lot of stories about it, and there were a lot of wars around it, so it had to have been valuable. So it was probably a pretty big city. And what did that say, like 1500 BC? That's only 3,000, 4,000 years ago? 3,500 years ago? Completely gone. To where, in order just to find it, you have to like dig down deep to find any remains whatsoever. Pretty scary stuff.
The Monster of Troy.
What is that?
The Monster of Troy was one of the scariest sea creatures from Greek mythology, a giant beast sent by Poseidon to attack the city of Troy as a punishment. According to the myth, this monster would rise from the sea to terrorize the coastline, and the only way to stop the attacks was to offer a young woman as a sacrifice, chained to rocks near the shore. Eventually, the hero Heracles—
just imagine like the monster is just some old grumpy man.
The only way I'll stop terrorizing you is if you give me a young lady whom I will abduct. and touch.
I don't know, dude. Well, it is pretty crazy though that like human sacrifice used to be such a big thing, and pretty much I feel like every society, or at least a lot of societies, and it still happens. Like there still are tribes out there that do practice human sacrifice.
Arrives and kills the creature, saving the girl in the city. It sounds like a typical myth, but there is something more to it. In the region around ancient Troy, they found something that might explain where this story came from. The area sits near coastal cliffs
like
and
an
rock
alligator?
formations where, over time, erosion has exposed large fossilized bones from ancient sea creatures, some belonging to extinct whales and other giant marine animals that lived millions of years ago.
Yo, that
These
was not a
bones can be
whale.
enormous, and with strange shapes that look nothing like anyone would have recognized. Locals likely believed a real monster had once lived, or still lived, in the waters nearby. This is likely where the myth originated from.
I mean, there's insane creatures that still live on the planet today, and there's many that we have never, like we haven't even discovered yet as a species. Like we haven't discovered probably the majority of animals out there, at least in the water, let alone the ancient animals that have since gone extinct. So I actually believe that more than any of the other, although I mean, I guess I believe the other ones too, but this I actually do believe. Like it does make sense to me that thousands of years ago, there were like crazy creatures that don't exist anymore today.
The Pygmies and the Cranes. In the Iliad, Homer briefly mentions a bizarre war. He claims that every winter, migrating cranes fly south to the edge of the world to wage a bloody battle against the Pygmaioi,
What?
a mythical race of tiny humans. Ancient Greek pottery frequently depicts these tiny warriors armed with clubs and shields fighting off giant birds. It sounds completely absurd, but this myth is actually based on real geography and anthropology.
What?
European cranes do indeed migrate south every winter, and their flight path takes them deep into Central Africa. Through ancient trade routes with Egypt, the Greeks had heard distant, secondhand reports of the indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes living in these African regions. Peoples of remarkably short stature, often referred to as pygmy peoples, these tribes likely did hunt the large migrating birds when they arrived in their territory. The Greeks simply took something real and turned it into an epic mythological war.
That's insane. I wonder like what those birds had against the pygmy people. Like they just flew south and were like, that's looking like a nice little meatball stew to me. Like would they eat them? Because I guess if you're small enough, like a bird could eat you. That just seems so crazy that there was a war between people and birds. It's like in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. But in this case, it's like all the tiny people going, the birds are coming. We gotta prepare. Prepare the spears for the birds. Next we have River Acheron.
According to myth, souls had to cross a river called Acheron to reach the afterlife, usually guided by a
Ooh, I heard of
ferryman
this.
named Charon. The water itself was described as dark, slow-moving, and gloomy. At first, this sounds like pure symbolism, but here's the thing. There is an actual river in Greece named Acheron, and once you see it, the connection to the myth becomes clear. This river runs through a narrow gorge with steep rocky walls on both sides that block out a lot of sunlight, making the area feel dark. The water itself often looks black or deep green, and in some sections, the river disappears underground completely, flowing through hidden cave systems before reappearing. If you were an ancient Greek, it's easy to see how you'd come to the conclusion that it leads to the underworld.
That sounds sick though. Like I want to see some pictures of that. That sounds awesome. Assuming like you can actually get through to the other side. That would be a fun little excursion to do. Next, the Cyclopes. No way that's real. I mean, maybe there was someone born with one eyeball, sure, but like no way that they were like giants roaming the fields and herding sheep with one eye. No way.
The Cyclopes, giant creatures with a single eye, were seen as one of the wildest parts of Greek mythology. However, when researchers started looking at where these myths came from, they found something surprising. On islands like Crete and Sicily, which is exactly where many of these Cyclope stories are set, ancient people would sometimes come across giant skulls with a single hole in the eye area, buried in caves or exposed in cliffs. These skulls were real, but they weren't from any monster. They came from a now extinct animal called the dwarf elephant. An elephant skull has a large hole in the center of the face because it holds the trunk. To someone who has never seen an elephant, that central hole looks exactly like one giant eye socket. This means that the Cyclopes may not have started as pure fantasy.
Dude, that's crazy. How like, if you're uneducated, or not uneducated, but like uninformed, I suppose, you kind of just make assumptions into thinking things are things that aren't really things. Somebody quote that and put it on a pillow. That was a genius sentence. But it makes you wonder like what else we do that with today that we are uninformed of. Because I think that humans today think that we know kind of everything, when in reality we probably know a lot less than we actually do. And so I'm not saying we as in like not me, look how smart and fancy I am, but I'm assuming like a lot of scientists and whoever, you know, smart people assume a lot of things that probably aren't even true. And then kind of like the mass public just believes in that without even realizing that could not be true. Next, we have Charybdis.
For a long time, Charybdis, a monster living in the sea that could swallow entire ships, was one of the most terrifying creatures in Greek mythology. According to the story, she would suck in a massive amount of seawater 3 times a day, creating a giant whirlpool. When people looked closer at where this story was set, though, they found something interesting. The location described in the myth lines up closely with the Strait of Messina, a narrow channel of water between Sicily and mainland Italy. This strait actually does have strong, unpredictable currents, and because the strait is so narrow and connects 2 different bodies of water, there are whirlpools and sudden shifts in current. Even today, sailors describe how the local currents can suddenly drag small boats off course or spin them without warning. To ancient sailors, it would have seemed like something was breathing the sea in and out. Over time, this likely turned into the tale of Charybdis.
I mean, again, I kind of harped on this before, but it's kind of the same thing where like if you don't know, then you just kind of assume that there's a monster living down there. But I also wonder if they did know that there was no monster living down there, and then like they just, you know, it was just a bunch of men on a boat that were getting sucked around, pushed around in the middle of the ocean, and like they needed to come up with some sort of story to like kind of brag to their wives like what they went through. So they're like, oh, I'm trying to think of some crazy woman name back then. Persephone is the only one I can think of. Anyway, they're like, they just come home and they're like, oh, you'll never believe it. There was a giant 300-foot monster sucking every man in the water, and we all almost went overboard. What a crazy story. When really, they were just a current. I could see that happening.
The Amazons.
The Amazons. Hang on a minute. Everyone strap in. This one looks good.
In Greek mythology, the Amazons were a legendary tribe made up entirely of women warriors, skilled in horseback riding and archery, and said to fight just as well as, if not better than, any male soldier of the time. For centuries, this was dismissed as pure myth, largely because women in ancient Greece were strictly barred from military and public life. But then archaeologists started digging up ancient burial sites in regions near the Black Sea and into parts of Central Asia, areas historically linked to nomadic tribes like the Scythians, and what they found was surprising. Buried alongside weapons like bows, arrows, and swords were skeletons that, once studied closely, turned out to belong to women. This wasn't just one isolated grave either. Many burial sites across this region contained female skeletons with clear signs of horseback riding, like changes in bone structure around the hips and legs, along with healed injuries that matched wounds you'd expect from combat. When Greek travelers and soldiers encountered these communities, seeing armed women fighting confidently on horseback would have seemed shocking. Over time, these real encounters could easily have been transformed into the Amazons myth.
Shout out them women. Equal rights, equal lefts, that's what I say. It's actually kind of genius to have women in your army because men would assume that the woman is inferior on the battlefield. But if you arm a woman with a bow and arrow, even Steven, next thing you know, boom, the women will win. Next up, we have a fire-breathing chimera. I am calling cap. No way.
Fire-breathing chimera. According to Greek mythology, the chimera was a fire-breathing monster with the body of a lion, a goat's head growing from its back, and a venomous snake for a tail. The myth is tied to a very specific location, a rocky region in what is now Turkey, and that detail turned out to matter a lot. In that exact area, there's a place called Yanartas, and incredibly enough, if you visit this spot today, you can still see small flames flickering out of cracks in the ground without any obvious fuel source like wood or oil. For a long time, people thought a fire-breathing monster lived underground, and these flames were proof of its existence. Once scientists studied the area, however, they found the real explanation. The rocks in that region release natural gas, mainly methane, that seeps up from underground. When this gas reaches the surface and touches oxygen in the air, it ignites, creating small flames. It's easy to see how that mysterious flame, combined with strange animal bones or sightings, could turn into the myth of the chimeras.
You could easily see how that would turn into that. I don't know about all that. I don't know if I would look at fire on the floor and go, oh my god, it's a lion, goat, snake, scorpion, fire-breathing dragon. But cool to see where it came from. Anyway, this was a really awesome video. So if you guys enjoyed and want me to watch more things similar to this, then make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and click right here to watch another awesome one.